Episode 6 on the way.
Okay. So we rolling?
Yeah, we're live.
All right.
Thanks, Christian.
Thanks, Christian.
Thanks, Christian. Okay, guys. So got my great friend here. I've actually known this guy for, a long, long time. In fact, when I first got my surgeries on my shoulder after I got home from my mission, this dude was my therapist, so he's giving me lots of massages, and we're real close. We're close. Yeah, he was my favorite masseuse. I don't even know if you ever did give him massages.
I hope not.
Because I always asked. I was on time.
Hope.
Me and you were tight, but yeah. I'd rather have a girl massage my shoulder.
Yeah.
But so anyway, this is
the same way.
Yeah, when I get a massage, I don't know.
It's a personal preference.
Yeah,
it's okay.
That's right. So
oh my gosh.
This is Ty Hansen. And Ty Hansen is a good buddy of mine for a long time. I mean, we're talking, 15 years at least, maybe more, maybe 20 years. It probably is 20 years.
Probably
That's
is.
amazing. And
I have a good buddy, too, named Ty Hansen, one of my best friends growing up.
Really?
So, yeah.
Okay, well, Ty Hansen he was a star athlete in high school, great baseball player. He went on to play competitive softball, and he actually was on a world championship softball team, which is pretty hardcore. I don't know if you've seen some of these dudes that play softball, but they go all over the world, and they're these big old beefy dudes that just hit it out of the park every swing, and Ty's team actually won the world championship. And
really?
So, yeah.
Where was that played at?
We played it in Irving, Texas, so it's just outside of the Hood.
Oh, nice.
It was really, really nice.
There's a Hood in Irving, Texas?
Yeah, there was a Hood.
Isn't
right behind
the
Cowboy Stadium, the old one. Yeah, scariest place I've ever been.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, Ty also, he's basically your All-American kid, comes from your All-American family. His dad was a local, or might even still be a local church leader. Ty actually served a mission for the LDS Church in Japan for 2 years. Do you still speak Japanese?
Yeah, a little bit. Konnichiwa.
Oh, come on.
Ohayou gozaimasu.
Come on.
And so the reason Ty's here today is because Ty got an injury playing, was it baseball or softball?
Softball.
Got an injury in softball, and he was prescribed some painkillers. And the painkillers were Oxycontin, and he became addicted to them, and subsequently it progressed, and we'll talk about that. But he last year was released from the state penitentiary. Is that what you call it?
Yeah.
The point of the mountain. The is it a federal prison? What do you call it?
Prison.
State prison for 2.5 years. What was your actual conviction for?
It was theft by deception and then drug possession, paraphernalia.
Okay. So anyway, that's what we want to talk about today. So this is a guy who had everything going for him, who was an all-American kid, great at sports, great at school, going to college, doing everything, married, had kids, and was prescribed a painkiller and became an addict. And it took him down a path that he had to pay the price of going to jail. And so, Ty, tell me, how did you get? Tell me how that progression happened. Kind of give us like a rundown of how did that get to that point.
So the progression for me was pretty quick, but even saying that it was pretty quick, it still took 6-8 years for me to kind of end up in jail and in prison. I, started out kind of like you said, and was prescribed some Lortabs, and that went to Percocet, and Percocet went to Oxycontin. And by the time I knew it, I was a full-blown addict. And for me, those pills gave me, a warmth, warm blanket, a release from the stresses of life. They did so much more than just take away my pain. I had a lady that came to therapy one time with us and said that, I take painkillers all the time. They just take away my pain. And I thought that is the craziest thing I have ever heard in my entire life. And if you talk to people that have, been through addiction, I'm in school now to complete being a substance abuse counselor, and so I've learned a lot about addictions and a lot about kind of my own experiences in those things. It's just a really common thing for somebody to have a major traumatic event. Mine was my mom died while I was on my mission in Japan, and when I got home, I just didn't have the ability to process that stuff. I wasn't, my family was immensely supportive. My dad was wonderful. My brothers and sisters were incredibly loving and great, and we'd all been through this hard thing and kind of bonded over, but at the same time, I didn't know how to articulate where I was at. And so when I found painkillers and prescription drugs, for me, that was my release, and it was a way for me to get through the day without being sad or everything else. So.
Well, I can speak from personal experience because I've had so many surgeries that I didn't even really have any traumatic experiences, but I can remember I broke my toe sparring Muay Thai, and I was prescribed OxyContin, and that was the first time I'd ever been prescribed it. And it made the pain go away, but it made me feel like I was just in a good mood. I was just on my game. I could go to work and function great. I felt totally clear-headed. Everything seemed perfect. And I can remember counting down the minutes until it was time to take my next pill. Yeah. And so I remember asking my doctor, I'm like, this seems like a miracle drug because my pain goes away. I feel totally smart. I feel totally sharp. I'm in a good mood. I'm happy all the time. Why wouldn't everybody just take this? It's like the greatest thing ever. And he said, well, because you can become addicted and then you need more and more, and then eventually it doesn't have the same effects and it can just take you in a downward spiral. And I was like, well, you know what? Because I do like it so much and it is something that I look forward to so much, I need you to just prescribe me something else, because I was fearful that I was going to become dependent on it. Is that something that happens sometimes where people just like it so much that they just
it's a really common thing. It's a neat thing that you were, and had enough self-control to kind of walk away from it. But what I've found out in school lately is that all, and a majority of, prescription medications were only made to be taken for 14 days. And especially prescription painkillers were made to be and deal with acute pain, which is a high level of pain for only that amount of time. Once you go to day 15, 16, the painkillers not only quit taking away the pain, they also replicate some of the same symptoms at the same time that they immediately took away. So,
like, what do you mean? Well, replicate the same symptoms.
So you'll have painkillers, and on day 15 and 16, you'll have, say it takes away your shoulder pain, you'll have some kidney soreness, you'll have back pain, you'll have muscle soreness, you'll have tightness in other areas. So for the pharmaceutical companies, it's the perfect drug, because essentially it takes away and replicates the same thing over time that it originally helped you through. So people, that come off of opiates complain of sweats and nausea and vomiting and all that stuff, trying to come off of a pill that was originally prescribed to help you. And it does. In the first, a little bit when I took it, it gave me a ton of energy, a ton of, you could go out and do whatever and say whatever, and you didn't worry about any of it. So.
Okay, well, take us from, how did you get to the point where you went from being a drug addict to stealing stuff and going to jail? Take us through that.
I'm kind of curious too, because you said you're playing in a softball league as a fan. That's something I think it's very relatable to. I play in a softball league. A lot of guys playing an old man softball league. So
because you guys are old.
Yeah, super old. Take us.
Thanks for that.
Thanks, Ashley.
That hurts so much.
Take us from where you were at in your life, specifically, what you were kind of doing, and then just I don't know, catch us up story wise. I'm
so, and I went on a mission. I got home. I met a beautiful girl. I got married. I had kind of everything everybody's ever wanted. I had a brand new house. We had brand new cars. Married this beautiful girl. And what addicts do, and what I did at that time, was we live in a comparison. And so essentially what addicts do, and a lot of people do, is I compare my strengths with your weaknesses to feel better about myself. But I also compare my weaknesses against your strengths. And unfortunately, I had a little brother that is a stud and a great guy, but was immensely successful in basketball and other things. And
he played in the NBA, right?
Played in the NBA, was making millions of dollars a year. So even at that level, for me, I had thinking errors in these issues, and I thought, well, compared to my brother, or compared to my dad, or compared to Adam, or any of my friends, I'm not successful. And addicts can't it's a black and white thinking thing. So it's either I'm a stud and I'm successful, or I'm not, and there isn't any middle ground. And so for me, I was going to work and doing all the normal things, and we had a son, and I was happy, and I just couldn't get out of kind of this depressive rut and quit taking the pills. And there's a point with all opiates, marijuana, methamphetamines, all the drugs, that your brain literally kicks in and says, if I don't get this drug today, I'm going to die. And so that's kind of where the whole, they say now, once you get sober, it takes you 242 days for your neural synapses to return to function in the same level they functioned before you started taking the drugs.
242 days?
242 days of clean time. And I can say for me, after 6 or 8 years of use, I was in prison for an entire year. I was crazy that entire year. And I remember slowly picking up on things and things coming back and me kind of returning to some of the thoughts.
When you say crazy, what do you mean?
Crazy, like just not rational. Just told some guy that I was sponsoring in Alcoholics Anonymous is like, I want to go beat this guy up. And I said, yeah, go beat that guy up. I didn't think twice about it. But today, I have a sponsor, and it's a different process. I called him the other day and said, hey, I want to beat this guy up. And he said...
Explain what a sponsor is.
A guy that I talk to when I have concerns and issues.
Okay.
So somebody to talk to and kind of rely on that's been through the whole thing before. And usually they have more time in the program, more time of sobriety than you do. So they kind of are a roadmap to get you through everything. So call this guy up and I say, hey, I want to go beat this guy up. And he says, do you know this guy's family? I do. If you really care about this guy and his family, how can you ever hurt anyone? And so you kind of have to just completely change your thinking.
It wasn't Adam?
No, not Adam. I have some funny stories of getting beat up by Adam.
Really?
Yeah. If Adam ever says, hey, do you want to come roll with me? That's
roll with me.
Yeah.
I didn't know what that meant. Showed up, and then they took my shoes from me, and then Adam threw me around like a schoolgirl.
Yeah, that's how we became friends.
Yeah,
That's right.
Me too. So and this is a funny story. I meet Adam. We went to, and we were both part of, through Jason Littledyke, fantasy football.
Oh, that's right.
And we went up to Sundance, and then a couple days later, I called Adam and said, hey, do you want to go to lunch? And Adam says, I don't do lunch. But you can come work out with me, right? And,
that's
I
right.
said,
the one leg day. I said, you're going to last.
Yeah, you're not. He goes, you're not going to do well. So all I can relate it to, there's a story, motivational speaker, Will Smith, he talks about, they say, why are you so successful? And he says, because I'm willing to die on a treadmill. That's literally, and I did not bring my A game, and I thought I was going to die for like a week after that. And then, because Adam absolutely,
usually the killer.
Yeah, Adam was so excited to have me come hang out with him, but it was literally, I don't think my legs have ever been the same.
So, that was a long time ago. Do you still do leg day, Adam?
I do, but I don't do squats anymore. I do hip
Every
sled.
time, every
like
time
that.
I see Adam at the gym, he's always on his phone.
That's true.
Like
do a lot of
literally
phone
9
work.
times out of 10, I
true.
see Adam at the gym.
That is true.
He is always on his phone. He's standing next to the machine, hogging it for like 3 hours.
This probably
just on his
these
phone.
podcasts are probably the longest I ever go without looking
on
at
your
my
phone?
phone. Yeah, 45 minutes straight.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
impressive.
at night I actually have my earphones plugged in and I'm watching like a documentary. But if I'm with my wife or on a walk, I don't. In fact, on date nights, I don't take my phone.
That's good.
Yeah,
Congratulations.
and he was
Sometimes.
playing fantasy football back then. So
Yeah.
I quit
Yeah.
playing fantasy football because it ruined real football. Because I loved the Colts, and I would get pissed if the Colts scored with a rushing touchdown because I knew that Peyton Manning was my quarterback, and it was taking away his passing points. So I'm like, man, this is distorting my favorite sport.
Adam's fantasy name was Young Colt, and he drafted all the Colts.
Yeah, that's true. I'm like,
Back in the day when
that
you could
was-
still do
that's
that
why I
and
never
win.
won. Yeah, I never won in fantasy football. I was too emotional. It wasn't logical.
And Adam Lagar will select a kicker from the Colts again.
Yeah.
Yeah, dude, it was bad.
That's awesome.
Okay, so like Mike was saying, so then you go from that level and you are
So you started this like an injury initially. You started taking painkillers, and then you're saying this like progressed throughout years over like you had an injury and then you just were taking it like.
Yeah, so I went.
Was
to
it
the,
prescribed?
Originally, it was. I went to the doctor
Mm-hmm.
and called him up and said, "Hey, I have this injury," and he came in and it was on my ribs. I dove for a ball and I missed it and landed and I broke a couple of ribs, or
Mm-hmm.
at least I told the doctor I
Yeah,
broke a couple
yeah,
of ribs. I
yeah.
probably didn't,
Yeah.
but it hurt a ton, and I was trying to swing and play ball, and so I went to the doc and he gave me painkillers, and it was awesome, and so I continued to go, and then got into going to.
So from that point on, you never stopped. Like
No.
it was
So-
since
I had,
form.
I look back on it now, and I probably had 25 days of sobriety in 6 years. You know what I mean?
Wow.
But I wasn't able to stop for very long,
Mm-hmm.
and so that was kind of the crux.
In
of
those
the whole thing.
25 days, were you trying to, or was that just because you coincidentally couldn't come up with the drugs that day?
It's both. I think there were enough times where my family tried to intervene and say, hey, you need to stop this, and you take a couple days. But your brain is just so diseased and distorted that you really think, God, I got to get high, or I'm not going to make it through the day. And
Yeah.
So when you started taking them, you say that they're supposed to be prescribed for 14 days. How
Yeah.
did you keep getting prescriptions?
Well, they're not prescribed for 14 days. Doctors today, as you guys know, they just approved OxyContin for children, which is,
I didn't know that.
yeah, they just, for children, I think, 14 and older. So
Great, that's really
Why
great.
would they do that? I mean,
Well,
with
it's money
the danger
for them,
Really?
Huh.
Wow.
And that's the biggest thing. Anybody that has been to a doctor, and I don't want to go too far down
Yeah,
but they don't care. They're making money regardless. And what are you going to do? Come back in 30 days to see them again and get another prescription? So they're not too incredibly worried.
So how long were you able to get prescriptions before you had to figure out and
Turn to
not
the
get
black
prescriptions?
market.
Yeah.
So I was able to get prescription probably for the first year, and
Wow.
then my habit was as such that I was taking my entire prescription amount in the first 5 days.
Jeez.
And so between like 30 Lortab or 60 Percocet, I was burning through in 10 days. And so
Really?
the next 20 days, so you're not sick, you have this network of friends that and essentially you have to call them, and you can buy pills from anywhere. And this is when OxyContin was big in Utah County, and OxyContin was something that you could get these 80 milligram pills, and they'd give you 80 or 120 of them at a time, and people were selling them for $80 a pill or $100 a pill.
Per pill?
Yeah. And so
So how many a day would you take of those?
as many as I could get.
So how do you get that kind of money?
So at first, you blow through all your cash, you blow through your savings, and then you start stealing stuff.
Yeah.
And you
Yeah.
start lying to people, and you start doing whatever you've got to do to get. I was in prison with a guy that stole 212 snowblowers out of people's garages. Like,
Really?
yeah, you're just.
What do you do with us? I mean, then he sells them on KSL. I mean,
sell
how
them
do
on
you get money?
KSL, go pawn shops. Just wherever.
Really?
Yeah.
And so, like for you, like, did you just start stealing stuff to get money? I mean, how did you get that money?
Yeah, did you go through the whole like doctor shopping thing where you're trying to?
Yep, I went through the whole doctor shopping thing, and then.
What does
and
that
then-
mean, doctor shopping?
So you're going to more than one doctor.
Oh.
And you're getting double the
Prescriptions
pills.
from.
And they don't have your medical records?
So they
Then-
can if they pull Doppel records, and if you seem shady, but if you walk in there and are me and can play it off okay,
Yeah,
then
yeah.
nobody
Yeah.
is too worried about it. And,
Yeah.
and I did it forever, and it
Yeah.
was horrible. It was horrible.
Yeah.
But there wasn't anybody. There isn't. I progressed from there, and I went to heroin, and I can still remember shooting up a ton of heroin so much that I thought I was going to die, and going to the ER, and was there for 3 hours, and then they turn you loose. I mean, there's
Really?
just not there weren't a lot of resources like there are today.
Mm-hmm.
As far as recovery centers and places to go, and I think the knowledge of what's going on is increasing too.
So at what point did your family, like, and your wife, become aware of what was going on, and like?
She was aware before we got married. I'd stolen some pills from my brother
Mhm.
and his wife, and she was aware kind of before we got married that it was an issue for me. But I was still able to hide it really well.
Mhm.
And that's the biggest thing is, Adam and I have talked about this. You become this incredible liar and manipulator and person that you don't like, but your mind's telling you, well, this is how I have to survive. I'm not going to make it through the day if I don't do this. And so they just, you do whatever you've got to do, and you see people give up their families and their homes. And even Steve Sarkeesian, I mean, you look at that guy,
Mhm.
the AD went to him and said, hey, here's the deal. We'll keep you for the rest of the year. Just don't drink, and things will be cool. And that guy made it, a week? And then he's, Sunday morning, he's sitting in his office crying and drunk and a whole bunch of stuff. So.
Yeah. Well, so how did it get to the point where you got caught and sent to jail? And take us to that.
So I got caught a bunch of times, and I had good friends and guys that I knew from the police force and different things that were advocates and would pull me out of jail and try to help me out. And then, I had a lot of people that tried to pull me over and say, hey, this isn't working. Little by little, you get more and more crimes and more stuff, and more possession.
Like your rap sheet builds.
How do they catch you? Like you're just sitting there stoned and they drug test you?
DUIs.
Oh, really?
And then you're stealing stuff and you're pawning stuff and you get desperate enough, you're going to pawn something in your name that's stolen. And then that's, and then I was taking money from people that I knew. I cooked up this plan or that plan. Hey, I need this amount of money, and I had that stuff work out for me. And that was the kicker was, I really traded on, a lot of my family's good reputation, and a lot of, things you just should never do and would never do in real life. But, in order to stay high, I was willing to do it.
And so that's where it kind of crossed over to being more, the theft became large enough that it was serious enough that where you got prison time then.
Well, and I had a great, I had a buddy of mine that's brother I grew up with was my prosecuting attorney, and then I had a great judge named Samuel McVeigh, and he's an old Army colonel, and I remember still going before Judge McVeigh, and I was just still high and stoned and crazy and whatever, and he said something along the lines, I talked to my attorney, and my family was done, everybody was done, and I was so sick, and I was so messed up, and I had like this tiny moment of clarity, and I kind of told Judge McVeigh, look, I can't do this. I can't keep doing it to my family. I can't keep doing it to myself. And he said, if you don't quit doing a lot of the stuff you're doing, you're going to end up in prison. And I said to him, I think you should put me in prison because I can't do this. And he did. He sent me to prison right there.
That was the first time, like, bam, he said, I think you should go to jail, and that's when you served your time?
Yeah.
Really?
They go, well, he recommends you forthwith to the Utah State Prison. And so they jump on you and handcuff you, and you're out the door. So I'd done jail time. I'd done 10, 12 stays in the Utah County Jail, but that was the first,
So that they used to have the 3 strikes you're out type thing.
Yeah.
I mean,
California. They still have it in California.
Similar, I'd assume. So you crossed over from prescription drugs to heroin. How long were you on heroin for?
I was on heroin for about 3 years. So.
What and is that really what was like? I mean, not manageable, but where it like really kind of took a turn for the worst.
Heroin and OxyContin are the same thing. They call OxyContin hillbilly heroin, and really it's just a pure.
Yeah, like I love Justified.
Yeah, it's great.
What's more pure?
OxyContin is.
More
it's
pure
pharmaceutical grade. Yeah, because heroin's cut by.
Who knows who?
Yeah, who knows what.
Yeah.
We just lost 5 or 6 kids in West Valley from overdoses on heroin because they cut it with some stuff that killed the guys.
So I've heard that you hear these rumors that like in Utah County, in Springville, in Utah, that like the per capita heroin usage and drug abuse is like worse than like anywhere.
I don't know
in the country. Is that true?
I don't know the specific numbers, but Utah County's rough. Utah County, Pleasant Grove. I mean, there's a whole sub society here of heroin use. Yeah,
a lot of people know this. I had a kid working for me last year that was on heroin, and he ended up robbing me. He ended up stealing my checkbook and forging a check to himself. And I mean, at the end, like I tried to give this kid a job and help him out, and at the end of the day, he was just like, I'm sorry, I can't control myself, and he ended up going on a robbery spree. Armed robbery spree in Utah County last year, and he's in prison now as well.
Yep.
And it was the heroin that got him.
When I was in high school, I had gotten mixed up in prescription drugs, and it never got bad enough to where it went to heroin or anything. But and you talked about lying and stuff like that, I was the best liar on Fister. I came up, like the things that I came up with, like right on drop of a dime. Like I think back on it, and I'm like, how did I even think of that? And I remember being like in those moments and like I remember thinking everyone else is wrong but me. Like, I was in such denial and literally believed, like, I would say something out loud and none of it was true. But I believed every single word coming out of my mouth. Every single word.
You actually believed it?
Yeah. Like, to the point where, like, because I had to. Because if I didn't believe it, then no one else would. Like, if I didn't believe it, then, like...
you lied so much you couldn't separate what was true.
I didn't know.
From
And there were things that I would, like, say and things that I would do that it was, like, I think back on it now and I'm like, how did I even think that that was a valid story at all? Like, and so were you, like, and eventually, thankfully, I got out of it. Like, I never got too bad. But were you, in those moments, were you, like, in denial? Did you think that you were okay? Like, did you think that, or were you kind of like, this is bad, like,
So you have both of those moments, but when you don't have kind of a hard rock bottom to things and you get out of something, I can remember getting a DUI in Tooele County, and I had $2,000 in my pocket. And so I literally got picked up on my DUI, bailed myself out, and was back in my truck in like 45 minutes.
You bailed yourself out with the money in your pocket?
Yeah, bailed myself out.
Holy crap.
And literally, like
you're like, oh, that was nice.
Okay, cool,
and I remember like 47 minutes later sitting in my truck going, that was bad. Like that was too easy.
Yeah.
And so when you don't have repercussions from things, and you know, we'll get into this a little more, but if you ask my father about what kind of ended up saving my life, it's when he realized that he couldn't do anything more for me. And my dad's a wonderful guy and you know, financially does very well and very, very kind and loving, but he had to say, look, everything I do for my son going forward is going to kill him. And so he literally had to walk away. And that's, you know, literally what saved my life, was going through that.
So he essentially cut you off then, is what you're saying? Like financially stopped bailing
just
you out?
Completely, yep.
What's your relationship like with your dad now?
Awesome.
Awesome,
yeah. He's wonderful.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Well, so I remember I went in to do, I don't even know what it is, but I went in to do like a speaking thing at the prison and saw you there, and it was way cool to see you. It wasn't cool that I see, holy crap, Ty's in prison, but it was good to see you because I knew that you had been struggling, and so I was glad to see that you were getting help, and I think I knew that you might be there. Oh yeah, my parents had told me, so I knew I was going to see you, but you told me that you could get drugs in prison. So how were you able to get off drugs when drugs were still available in prison?
So I don't know if you guys have seen the movie Flight with Denzel Washington.
Yeah.
And he says that you eventually get to a point where you just can't tell one more lie and you just can't hurt one more person. I had a letter from a good friend of mine when I went to prison, and I'd written her a letter and essentially said, you know, I'm in here with murderers and child molesters and rapists and all these horrible people. I don't belong here.
Yeah.
And like 2 days later, she sent me a letter back. And it said, you are exactly where you need to be. And you hurt people that loved you and cared about you. And you are everything that everybody is around you. And I remember that was kind of the wake-up call. And then you just start to kind of fight through things. They say change. You have to work harder at changing than you do at staying still. And I just decided I can't do this anymore. I'm tired of hurting. I don't want to do it. And prison's rough. Like anytime you wake up every morning and the thing that wakes you up is your cellie taking a poop. You know, and it stinks, and it's right by your head. Like you sit there and think, "This is, you know," and you're not going anywhere. It's bad.
So yeah, let me ask you about that because it's something that I've always been super interested in. I had a friend growing up who, one of my best friends, actually eulogized him, but he committed some crimes at a young age, and he ended up going to prison and was in the prison system. And instead of it acting as a correctional facility, in my opinion, it actually made him much worse. Sure. I mean, he ended up going to Supermax. In Colorado, and the things that he saw and the things, basically the person that he had to become to survive ended up changing him so much, and he ended up getting addicted to heroin in prison.
Yep.
And he was addicted. He was never able to kick that addiction in prison, and it followed him even after, and ultimately he ended up passing away. And so I've always wondered about the people who are able to take that opportunity and learn from it, you know, and kind of like you obviously have. What's the difference of someone that's in that prison situation from becoming hardened by it and becoming kind of a permanent residence of the system, you know, and like you?
Well, don't like 85% of prisoners go back to jail?
Yeah, I think it's probably higher than that. The recidivism rate's really high. A lot of the people that I knew and loved and were great in there and were sober and great people have all gone back. I have one friend that I think has gone back 3 or 4 times already. The biggest difference, it's like recovery. How do people recover? Why do they recover? Why do some people get at a young age? Why do they not? Prison, when you go in, if you're a young kid, you have to, and you're only $1.60. I mean, I'm 220 and I'm little. And you think they lock up tiny people. They really don't. I mean, people are push-ups, sit-ups every day, and they're looking to have some kind of release. So it's everybody that likes to fight, and it's a scary deal. The issue is these young kids get pulled into gangs. They get pulled into different things, and they'll be the one. So if you end up being a gang member, you're going to be the one that holds the drugs for the rest of the gang. And so if you're holding all their drugs and you get caught up, that's another 10 years for having drugs in a facility. You know what I mean? You end up going federal.
Drugs in there? I don't understand.
There's a lot of different ways. They were doing it by the mail when I was there. Suboxone strips were so little, they had them and they'd put them on the back of stamps, and they'd cut those stamps up, and a piece like this big, you guys, was worth $80.
Jeez.
And they dissolved that. They'd get a needle. And
so much
from a diabetic, they'd get a needle from a diabetic, they'd dissolve that, and they'd shoot it up with the needle. And the needle, usually those guys had Hep C or AIDS or something, and they'd just share it.
Wow.
They wanted to get high so bad.
Wow.
So yeah, for young kids, it's ruthless. And for me to go in and be independent, and then I was blessed. I went to the drug program Conquest, and I had a guy named Greg Hendricks there, and Desmond Lomax, and Miss Conley, that were all there that kind of worked with me. But I did the program for a year, and then I actually got to run the drug program in the prison for the last year and a half. And that was really therapeutic for me because I got to see kind of behind the curtain to the therapy side of things, and I loved that.
So you said that when you were in prison the first year, you were still kind of messed up.
Yeah.
And you were in there for 3 years. So you're saying that after that kind of cleared out of your system and your brain essentially rewired itself, you were able to kind of realize the situation and the person that you'd become, and then kind of work to start correcting that?
Yeah, she said it perfectly. It's like you're watching your body go through the motions, and you don't believe everything's as bad as everybody tells you. And then you get a little bit away from it, and you're like, what in the world was I doing? Why? Because I did some was crazy. You know what I mean? And talk people into stuff that you never do normally. Yeah. But you have to be able to slowly kind of piece that back together. And then I was lucky enough to have good therapists and people around me to say, hey, you're going to be okay. Let's work backwards through it. And there's a therapy called cognitive behavioral therapy where they kind of work you back through what's going on. And I had the director there, that's the deputy warden there now, Mr. Hendricks, would challenge me on my thoughts. So you think this, okay, well, let's rework your thought. You know what I mean? And like, being upset at my dad for calling the police on me that got me to jail, that got me to prison, right? That's crazy because that literal thing saved my life. But when you're in the mix of things, you just can't sort it out.
And you actually have a brother who passed away.
Yeah.
And how did that happen?
So when I was in there, he got married, and I guess his wife and he were in argument, and he took some Xanax and didn't wake up. He'd had some struggles with addiction his whole life, but really he's my brother that looked like Leonardo DiCaprio and was a great athlete and was funny and everybody loves and still talks about, and he just couldn't get through it. So
he was, you mentioned earlier, and we talked a lot about this last week too with another guest, but depression, it obviously seems like it might run in your family.
Sure.
How much of that played into where you ended up, and like what do you do now, and like what are your habits that are different that help with that?
So you kind of got to reprogram yourself. My family, there is some depression stuff. I did have an uncle that committed suicide, and there's a piece of that I think in everybody. For me, when I went to prison, I was supposed to have like 4 or 5 different surgeries on my hip and my shoulder and everything else, and I found that I got really, really healthy and I lost a bunch of weight, and even now I get up and go to the gym every morning, and that for me is more therapeutic and kind of calms my day and keeps me kind of in a better place across the day. So I saw you guys podcast on hard work pays off.
Yeah.
Adam and I have talked about this a few times, but it's like my brother and Adam said this to me, and your dad said this, you know, if you do what no one else will do, you'll have what no one else will have. And there's a peace that kind of comes with getting up in the morning and working hard. And I can still remember Adam, you know, killing me a bunch of times. But you always knew he was going to work hard, and that's just a neat thing. And when you surround yourself with people like that, you make yourself better.
Huh. Well, dude, it's just like for me, I want to know, because I know that there were numerous times that you were using when we were together, and I never had any idea. I'm terrible at recognizing it. I would like, you know, to talk to people and help us understand how you can tell if someone's on drugs, because I am terrible at recognizing if someone's stoned or on drugs or an addict. I mean, how can you tell?
You know,
you're just naive.
I am, well, but I would like to. I mean, there's a lot of naive people. So how do us naive people? How do we recognize that so we can know whether or not we should try to help them?
I don't know that you can, and I don't know. You know, addiction's a thing where you can't reach out until somebody reaches out to you. I ran into a bunch of my mission companions, and we went golfing the other day, and these guys were wonderful, and each one of them came to me and said, "We feel like we let you down when you were going through this because we didn't know what to do." And these are brothers, you know what I mean? And the reality is, until that person is ready, you have to distance yourself. The way you recognize an addict, come get me or go get another addict, because I can tell you what's going on and what they're using, in 2 seconds, where anybody else can't.
Really?
And it's kind of the gift of addiction.
Really?
Well, and
So,
that was like, even growing up or around here, like I can walk up to someone and know, like I can immediately tell if someone's had one shot or one beer, or like I can immediately tell when someone's like what they're on and what they're using and how much they've had, like immediately.
What
and
am I
so
on
when
right now?
just life.
Mountain Dew from the Maverick.
Or Maverick. No, but and when I was in the middle of it, like the one thing that, because no one can tell you, so many people can tell you like you need help, and like you'll never ever listen to them until like you have to change yourself. There is not one person that can sit you down and help you until you actually want it yourself. But the people who really helped me the most and like helped me in my like lowest points were that no matter like what, like they just, no matter what I was on, no matter what I was doing or whatever, regardless if it was tough love of, you know, cutting me off or whatever, they were still like there. Like the people that were, like I have a young women's leader who, I wasn't close to my parents. I wasn't really close with them, and so I couldn't tell them anything. I couldn't go to them, but she was always there, and she always just loved me regardless. Like whether if it was tough love or real love or, you know, helping me through whatever, like she was just there, and she always like helped me out. And she was one of the people that saved my life, like that got me out of it, was just loving me regardless of whatever I was going through and not judging me through the fact that I was on whatever drug at whatever time in my life. And so
well, the one thing, you know, so we can kind of get things going, wrap things up, is I've heard, I'm friends with Court McGee and some of these other guys that go out and they work with Alcoholics Anonymous, and they say the things like, once you're an addict, you're always an addict. I mean, what does that mean, and how do you deal with each day as an addict, or do you consider yourself that way, or how would you summarize how you plan to stay clean for the rest of your life?
So, on the 23rd, I get married, and then the 25th, I'll have 4 years clean and sober.
4 years?
4 years.
Congratulations,
Thanks,
buddy.
man.
And congratulations on your
Yeah.
engagement.
I got
That's cool.
your things in the car.
Yeah.
I gotta give it to you. But
Thing.
invitation.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I know you're on Facebook, though.
Okay.
Fiance wanted to make sure I gave you one.
Cool.
So there you go.
All right.
But for me, you know, the biggest piece of kind of putting everything together, and the biggest piece of kind of figuring all of this out, is I've had a lot of people kind of go before me and show me the road. And so I work at Steps Recovery Center, and I'm the admissions director there, and I spend every day in a jail, a hospital, a detox, you know, a high school or somewhere, kind of sharing my story. And it's always fascinating for me to sit back, you know, if somebody's been on like a meth binge and they're 60 pounds or whatever, sitting in the hospital, I can literally sit next to them and say, I've been there. And I can also say, I'm only one shot or one drink away from being right back there. So you see homeless people and stuff, and I always try to give back and share it, because that's me. You know, that I've been homeless, I've been alone, I've been addicted, you know, and that's, you know, you completely recognize that. So I go to Alcoholics Anonymous meetings. Those are wonderful because it's just a support group of people that are just like me, that are, you know, and you see people just get really honest. And so that's been the biggest thing for me, is I have to be able to reach out to the people I love and say, hey, here's where I'm at. And there's a gal that shares at meetings that said, I'm not okay, I'm not all right, I'm not going to be all right, but at least I'm in a meeting today. And I think that, you know, they say in Alcoholics Anonymous book, there are those that recover, they only do so with rigorous honesty. For those that can't do that, they are such unfortunates, and you really just have to get to a point where you have to be dialed in on everything that you do.
So what would be like the one thing you'd like people to know from today's podcast? What's something that you think would be a good thing for whatever audience you'd like to?
Yeah, someone that's either struggling or knows somebody that's struggling like you, or what advice would you give them?
You know, I would say reach out for help. There's a ton of resources available with insurance, the way they're set up. There's a ton of recovery centers. There's lots of hope. There's lots of ways for people to help you, and please, you know, reach out. A mentor of mine was saying, you know, he's never lost somebody once they went into treatment, but people that were on the way to treatment, he's lost like 25, 26 people. So if you're right there and it's all going bad, reach out, because there's always somebody, young women's leader, you know, me, anybody. And that's what we, you know, I my phone is on all night. I will wake up and talk to somebody and walk them through it, just because it helps.
How many addicts do you think have called you since we've been in this?
My phone has rang the entire time.
Okay, so you probably, and those are, any of those people, do you think, are they drug addicts?
Yeah, or their families.
Wow.
So.
Yeah, that's amazing, man.
That's
Well,
awesome.
we're about out of time, but I mean, your honesty and your experience is seriously invaluable. And just like, you know, we've had kind of a couple people that have really overcome some hard things, and your story is just amazing and inspiring. So keep up the good work, man.
Well, hey, I hope you stick with it. I'm praying for you. You're a great dude. And thanks for coming in and being so honest, because
That's awesome.
being honest like that and being able to share that really is to help a lot of people.
I know someone will appreciate that. So
Anything we can do to help.
thanks, man.
So reach out.
you.
All right. Thanks,
That was a
guys.
good one.
Hi, buddy.
That was awesome.
Thanks, homeboy.
Thanks.
That was awesome.
Good. Thank you.
Dude, I appreciate you doing that.
Oh,
man.
anytime.
That's
Thanks.